Thank you to NWCZ Radio for allowing us to use their studio. You can check them out at nwczradio.com, or you can check them out on Facebook at NWCZ Radio as well. So go give them a check out, and here's the rest of the show.
The pharmacy is now open.
Hey guys, welcome to the VGRx podcast, your weekly dose of video game banter and news. Today we have a little bit of a special podcast. We're going to be discussing esports.
The history, yeah.
The history of esports.
Yeah. And not just what you know of today, but like everything. Fighting games, shooting games.
Yeah. We're gonna
broad strokes of everything
Yes.
with like little snippets of what we found interesting along the way.
And we're going to try and cover it the best we can.
Yes.
But before we do that, we did want to touch on one thing happening this week.
Should we introduce ourselves?
Oh, yeah. We should.
I'm Dan.
Hi, I'm Scott.
I'm Brittin.
And I'm Zach.
Wow, that was crisscross. That
The
is not-
usual
There you go,
cast.
That is not
was
how
of
it normally
characters.
is.
Great. So this is something that I have a roommate who's very excited about this. His name's Torsen. And we might invite him on the show, I think, in a few weeks to see kind of where he's gotten to with the game or whatever.
Yeah.
But I know that
What
Zach,
game?
Monster Hunter
Oh,
Worlds.
yes,
Yeah, I
yes.
didn't mention that, did I? So Zach and Scott, I know both of you played the beta and are looking forward to it.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Scott, you have a little bit more history with Monster Hunter than me, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't played a ton, but I've played a lot on like the Wii, and I played like the DS versions. But it was funny because I hopped in the game and I started straight off with the easy the easy monster, because there was there was 4 different levels. There was like easy, medium, hard, and then like very difficult. And I don't remember exactly how they
And
worded it.
is that the one on the 3DS you said?
No, this is the beta. This is the
Oh,
beta that
on
was
the
playing.
PS4.
Okay.
Yeah, this is I'm playing the beta, and this is the different levels that they had that you were able to fight. And I kind of got into it thinking, I was like, I'm gonna have to relearn everything. This could be another learning curve. I was like, but I'll start off easy. And so I started off easy, and I didn't defeat the monster for whatever reason. But you can essentially do it 2 ways. You can either do it single player or you can do it multiplayer. Monster Hunter is meant to be played multiplayer, period. There's like, you can do single player, but it's just not the same thing.
I remember playing Monster Hunter Tri on the Wii years and years ago, and it was all right. I kind of enjoyed myself, but I didn't get that far into the game, and I bet that part of that was just that I wasn't playing with anyone.
Yeah. So, and it's kind of hard, like, especially if you don't have people who know what they're doing, it's even more of a learning curve. But what I did was, instead of going, I went easy, didn't get that far, but then I went straight to the hard mode, because in this last beta, they allowed you to basically fight or like hunt down the main monster of the game. So like the cover monster. I don't remember the name of it exactly, but
Is it Nergigante?
I think I think it's like
Yeah.
Negagante. It's like this big dragon thing that like can turn different elements on, so like fire or electricity. It's craziness. But I joined just straight up, second time I started playing the beta, joined straight into the very hard, and the guys I was paired with instantly knew what they were doing. And I didn't really know what I was doing, but just by watching what they were doing, I picked it up so fast that I like just jumped straight into my next match in the very hard mode and knew exactly what I was doing. So it is very a visual learning based game. A lot of it is reading different equipment, and I know there is going to be a lot more in the base game. So
Yeah.
you can create items, you can create armor. So it's a lot harder than what I'm making it sound like right now, but it was so much fun. I didn't get to beat them. I was really, really close, but they only give you 15 minutes to do it, which was not enough
Which is
time.
a super short time for a Monster Hunter hunt.
Yes, but I played around with a bunch of different weapons, and what I can say about the game is it's beautiful in every aspect.
Yep.
It is made to be played on a PlayStation 4 at 4K. Honestly, there is
no Switch port.
No, unfortunately, probably not. We talked about this a little bit.
Yeah.
Me and Brittin did. But I made the argument that by playing the beta, there is literally no load time. So in normal Monster Hunter games, you would go from area to area and there would be a loading bar. It'd be very fast, but there would still be a loading bar. In this game, you go from area to area and it's already there. Like there's no load time, there's no wait time, there's nothing. It is seamless, 60 frames per second, 4K goodness. Everything about that game is beautiful.
Do you know if you have to play this game online? Is it specifically for player, or
you
can
do not
you go
have to. You
solo?
You can play solo. Like I said, you can play solo, and it's fun.
I've heard that that's one of the differences about this game is that it was balanced to support both play styles simultaneously, as opposed to one until you have to go to the other.
Yep.
Which is, I guess, how it's worked in the past.
Yeah.
And that's probably the wall I've hit in previous Monster Hunter games where I stopped
Very
playing.
likely.
You should play it multiplayer. Like honestly, I'm probably gonna buy it tonight and go straight to multiplayer. Probably not even touch the single player for a while. And normally I'm a single player first type of guy, but there's something about playing with 3 other dudes and everything that's going on that just makes the game crazy. Like
Or girls.
or girls. Yes, sorry.
Girls play video games.
Sorry,
too,
I don't want to assume any genders.
3 other
here.
humans.
Yeah, my bad. Zach, what were your thoughts? You played it too.
So this is my first introduction to Monster Hunter, but I didn't expect it to be so lighthearted.
Yeah.
I expected it to
It's
be
a
really,
funny series.
really dark and really gloomy.
No, not at all.
I love the customization aspect, so changing your gear, crafting, that kind of stuff.
I have heard, by the way, that the character creation is like super in depth.
Not in the beta.
Not in the beta.
No,
in the
in the main game. I mean,
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. Torsen is not watching any reviews past character creation, and he's already predicting he's going to spend like 2 hours making his character because he's
Oh my
going to have
goodness.
that many options.
Probably, yeah. But in the base game, or in the beta, there was like 6 faces you could choose from, and a couple
Right.
hairstyles. But anyway,
And so I think when I first played it, I didn't get, I mean, I don't really have any past knowledge on it, but when I first played it, I didn't get any hint that I needed to play multiplayer to be able to beat it.
Oh, cool.
oh, did you just play single player?
I just play single player.
Okay.
And then if I buy it, which I'm probably going to, I'll probably stick with single player until I can't go forward any further.
I mean, that's
That's
not
kind of my
necessarily a
style
bad
too,
idea.
Zach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you're learning the game, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Having the past knowledge that I
Yeah.
do definitely help me out, and seeing just other players do it help me out as well. But I do not think starting single player first is a bad idea at all.
And it was extremely easy to pick up too.
Yeah.
So like the controls and stuff were really easy to learn.
It is. They have very simple controls, but if you want to get complicated with it, you can.
Yeah.
So-
So it was very friendly, and I'll probably pick it up.
Dude, if you do, let me know when you're done with the single player and we'll play together.
Oh yeah.
Dude, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
So now that we've talked about one of the newest games
They get hyped.
to come out,
They get hyped.
we're going to take a step back and
Yes.
talk about some of the oldest video games that
Yes.
are around.
So before we get started, though,
Yeah.
I do want to mention we're going to split this up into 2 episodes. So this
Yep.
first episode that we're doing right now, this is going to be the history of fighting games in esports and the history of shooting games in esports. Very broad stuff.
Yeah, we're going to end up touching a little bit on some of the other stuff.
Yeah.
But when we were doing the research on this, we found that there's basically 4 big genres with some definitely a lot of like little exceptions along the way
Yeah.
that we'll touch on probably towards the end.
Yeah, but next week's episode,
fighting games, shooting games, and then real-time strategy, and then
MOBAs.
multiplayer online battle arena.
Yep.
MOBAs.
So that's going to be next week. We're going to talk about RTSs and MOBAs, because if it wasn't for RTSs, there wouldn't be MOBAs. So, and me and
Almost.
me and Dan can literally talk an entire episode about that. So that's why
Yeah.
we did it like that.
Yeah.
And maybe Brooks will be here, because I know he does a lot of RTS stuff. So we'll talk about that later. But for today, we are going to be talking about fighting games and shooters. And we're going to start off with Dan here.
Yeah. So, okay. Before we talk about fighting games and shooters, actually, before we talk about esports at all,
Oh, okay,
we have
dang.
to talk about how we got there.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So, video games have been around for quite a long time.
Oh, a little bit, yeah.
And
So is Brittin, though. So
yeah.
I remember the early days back in my day.
back in my day.
So a lot of people will peg. There's a tournament in 1997 that we'll talk about in a little bit that people tend to peg as like this is the beginning of true esports. But before that, there are a lot of tournaments and things that people did that were pretty interesting. So the earliest known video game competition that was held was at Stanford on October 19 in 1972.
But these were like LAN party type stuff. Like this was local
is people
stuff.
sitting in. I mean,
Yep.
the internet didn't really exist then. It
Yeah.
was not in a consumer way.
Yeah.
I think they probably DARPANet, is that what it was called?
Don't know.
There's some early like proto internet that was.
But
in
this was the
development,
first
but-
recorded kind of esports sanction of it, almost.
I wouldn't call it esports.
Okay, I very, very broad.
I would call
Sounds
it
more
people
like dorm room getting together and hanging out and playing
right.
games.
It's
Fair
people
enough.
at Stanford gathering to play a game called Space War, which I didn't really look into, but in 1972 is going to be pretty simple.
Believe it or not, this game predates me. I can't tell you anything about it.
Oh man, I never thought that could happen.
Hey.
And the prize, of course, this is important. This prize was a year subscription to Rolling Stone.
Solid.
Ooh, that's a good prize.
Yeah, so I mean that'd be something that someone in 1972 would be pretty interested
Yeah,
in.
back in the day, that was a big deal.
Yeah. So it wasn't until, at least by the timelines that I found, it wasn't until about 1980 that there was anything bigger than that. But in 1980, Atari held a Space Invaders Championship. They got over 10,000 people to show up.
Do you know where this was held?
10,000?
Let
That's
me
an
see if I can
insane
find
number.
that.
This is like the earliest days of arcades.
Yeah,
Physical
because
arcades, upright machines.
Yeah, a lot of people played arcade games like locally in tournaments.
And actually, in the same year, I guess the first high score record keeping organization called Twin Galaxies. I've never heard of it before.
I literally just heard about it the other day.
Really?
Yeah.
You
Oh,
guys
that's
should watch
interesting.
King of Kong, A Fistful of Quarters.
and that-
You'll learn all about it.
Okay.
So that was founded by Walter Day. Did I write that down right? Walter Day, I believe, is the guy's name. All right. Let me. Oh, right there.
Can we not mention the dude who did Dragster, by the way? Because he cheated. So
Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Yeah. That's not one that I came across.
perfect. Let's keep it that way.
And then the 80s, also in the early 80s, you have pop culture starting to embrace video games. So you have like reality shows that will have video game events on them.
Like Nickelodeon type reality shows.
Yeah,
like
there
Double
was
Dare
a
and
apparently
stuff.
there was a show in 1982 to 84 called Starcade, which was basically people trying to beat each other's high scores.
Okay.
I'm sure it was more interesting than it sounds. I'm sure they had competitions and like, this is how you're going to do this today and stuff.
I mean,
like
that was competitive gaming at the time, though.
Yeah.
Was
Yeah.
leaderboards,
Right.
high
It was
scores.
high scores. And of course, I mean, who can forget in 1982 Tron?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
I mean, we just had a remake of that in the last several years. I don't
Yeah,
actually remember
it's
when
been
that
a
came
while.
out. It's been a while now.
It's
but
been a hot minute.
yeah. But then you get to 1988. There's a game called NetRec. So I looked into this game a little bit. The structure of the game, and I could be wrong on this. I read a couple articles on it. You have a square map, split into 4 quadrants, and 2 teams come into this map. You join a server in some of the ancient ways, I'm sure that you do.
And only
probably
one
predating
leaves.
Brittin once again in terms of the function.
Dang, Brittin.
Absolutely proud of it.
And so you would join this game, and I think it went up to like 8-on-8 or 16-on-16 or something like that. But each quadrant had planets in it, had a set number of planets. Each of the planets had different properties, and they were balanced and whatever to have certain production. So there would be like agricultural planets that would generate soldiers over time, and there would be your home planet that did other stuff. There were mining planets and refueling planets, I think. You get the idea. There's like different things that generate different resources. And so you as the player, you're flying around in a ship. And in order to play the game, what you're doing is you have your quadrant, and your team owns all the planets in your quadrant. And you want to try and eliminate the other team by bringing them down to 3 planets.
Okay.
You start with 10, something like that. And so you can kind of see where this is going. You'd have these team play things, and they had rules that would encourage the fighting and whatever. And so that became popular, right? And this is also when the internet was starting to be a thing. So then you get to about 1993, about 5 years later, and there's a quote from Wired magazine that I read that cited NetRec as the first online sports game. Reading into NetRec, I also saw a few people claim that it's probably the first thing that resembles a MOBA.
Okay.
You controlling, your one character.
I can see that.
Top-down,
Yep.
objective-based game, right? And obviously it's very different than what we have today. But
I can see where that comes from,
Yeah.
like a MOBA perspective.
so that was a new thing for me. It sounds like an interesting game, to be honest.
Let's
I
play
think
it.
I would play that. Yeah.
I don't
You
know.
gotta be out there
if we
somewhere.
could find it, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, and then we get into the 90s.
Yeah.
So it's 90 to 92, I think 93, that NetRec became more popular. But at the same time, we also have two events that I think a lot of people probably have heard of, at least in background. The Nintendo World Championships.
Never heard of it.
The Nintendo Power Fest '94, which was basically the same event but 4 years later.
Yeah, it was essentially wasn't it like involved with the magazine, the Power magazine?
This is something that I kind of hoped Brittin would know
yeah,
more about.
honestly.
I don't remember anything about it personally, but
I know the first one, but the Power one I haven't really heard of.
Yeah, the one in
it was
94,
more
I'm not
focused
as
on the
familiar
Super
with.
Nintendo, as I recall.
Got it. Okay, because
Reading about
I
it.
remember hearing the first one was it Nintendo the championship. I remember first place got like a special golden cartridge of the game and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The games they played, it was like 3 snippets from popular games, Super Mario Brothers, maybe. What else did they play? I don't know, Duck Hunt or something like that.
They
just
played,
little snippets of these games, and they had these custom cartridges there for that purpose
Yes.
that were, just had those snippets of the games on them, and those are still floating around out there, which is kind of cool.
Some of those are worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right?
worth an absurd amount of money.
There's a gold one that is worth in the tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
It's insane, and I bought it. I mean,
Lies. Maybe we'll find one at Goodwill someday. Keep your eyes peeled.
oh
You
my gosh, you know what? Like, to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if some are just floating around in garage sales being sold for $2.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
nobody
absolutely.
knows.
How
Quite
how
possible.
disgusting would that be?
Don't know how many are accounted
Stradivarius
for, but
violins from like centuries ago
Yeah.
are still occasionally found in like the equivalent of that.
Yeah.
Someone whose grandpa owned a violin and it sat in the attic for 35 years,
Yeah.
and then they go up and they look at it and they realize, oh, this
This
I
is-
mean, maybe I should go get someone to look at this. And
Yeah.
then they eventually do, and they find out, oh, this thing's worth $500,000. No big deal.
Oh, man.
So
It's crazy. Insane.
But,
anyway, off topic.
yeah, so
Continue.
Nintendo World Championships.
Yes.
we
and-
could maybe mention the movie The Wizard here at this point too. Have you?
yeah, Brittin wanted
Have any
to
of you
do
guys
that.
seen that movie?
I
I
haven't,
don't
but
know.
I've definitely heard of it. It's an older movie.
Fred Savage, and it was the movie was almost a piece of marketing for Nintendo and for the World Championships. But it's a pretty endearing movie too. Fred Savage's little brother is autistic, and he's kind of a savant when it comes to video games. And he catches wind of this tournament and just leaves and makes his way there. And the movie's about Fred Savage and a friend of his trying to keep up with his little brother and find him. And then eventually when they do, get him to the tournament so that he can compete in it.
Yeah.
And the movie culminates with the first ever footage being shown off of Super Mario Brothers 3, which was kind of a big deal because it wasn't in arcades yet.
Got it.
It wasn't available yet. So people would go see the movie just to catch a glimpse of Super Mario Brothers 3.
Isn't that where that was with the Power Glove, right? They like
the famous line from from
Yeah.
the movie? What is that thing? It's the Power Glove. It's so bad. Super 90s.
It still is. But yeah.
So some of the other stuff that was happening at the same time, Blockbuster actually ran.
What's that?
Right. So for those who don't know, Blockbuster was a video rental store in the
What's that?
90s.
What's a video game rental?
2000s.
Yeah, it was
I
early
guess.
2000s, yeah.
They also
Yep.
did. They also did some video game rentals. But Blockbuster ran some world championships of their own. They ran it every year. Is the impression I got. A couple games that they ran were NBA Jam. This is one of the first surprises that I ran into. Is that people were playing sports games at what would later be referred to as esports tournaments.
Yep.
And it turns out that that's a common theme. So we might touch on that more at the
I
end.
think FIFA is one of the biggest
Yeah.
video
Yes.
games in
Yes,
the world
I
still
ran
to
into
this
that.
day, like sales-wise.
a lot.
Yeah.
Several of the tournaments that I found was like FIFA was something that was played at.
So not too surprising, I guess.
I mean, it was for me. I didn't,
Okay.
I didn't see that coming. I didn't know that was the case. So, and then also Virtua Racing was something else that they did. Once again, more TV shows, reality TV shows. Mostly, I don't think I found anything that was like dedicated to just video games, but there were a lot of things that would touch on them as part of a reality TV show. Then you get to the late 90s, right? And this is kind of where you see the formative like esports like organizations start to come up. So the Cyber Athlete Professional League,
CPL.
something that emerged in this time. You have the PGL, the Professional Gamers League. And then there was something else. Oh, no, those are later. So those are the two that kind of show up in the late 90s. CPL starts running events, and they include Counter-Strike, Warcraft, and Quake. Counter-Strike? Really? Oh, I see. Sorry.
You sound so surprised.
Well, because Counter-Strike didn't release until the year 2000.
Got it.
So that's why
Are
I
you
was surprised.
Are you thinking about original Counter-Strike, or are you thinking about
like
CSGO?
actually the original? Like I just read this in the car on the way here just to make sure that I knew.
Did it
was,
exist in mod form before that or something?
like in 1999?
Sure.
But the reason I read that just now is that I have my notes not organized very well.
That's fine.
And it's
Could've fooled
CPL
us.
events will eventually include all those games.
Got it. Okay.
And that all leads up basically to our 1997 date that I mentioned at the beginning, June of 1997. Microsoft sponsors the Red Annihilation Tournament. This happens at E3. It's a Quake tournament, Quake 3, I think.
Yeah. That was a big deal too, because
Yeah.
like that was kind of a major brand, kind of almost taking a chance. I want to say.
Right. Like you see a lot of major brands start to put money into esports here, especially in the late 90s,
Yeah.
because you see, Microsoft does it and then other people kind of follow in.
I mean,
but, but in 1997, you have the Quake tournament. So I don't actually know what the professional format is for Quake. I never played Quake when I was
feel
younger.
like it's arena free for all.
I think
Yeah.
it is too. It's
Based-
I know it's an arena based.
based on the fact that every Quake tournament that mentioned a winner in my notes here, like mentioned a person and not a team.
Okay.
So I would assume it at some point at least turns into a free for all.
Maybe the person's name is the team.
Probably not.
Okay. Sorry. I just wanted to. I don't
So
know.
okay, the prize for this tournament though, and this is probably part of why it got some attention, was so Quake's lead dev John Carmack offered up his car. His car is a Ferrari 328 GTS Cabriolet.
That's right.
What?
Yeah,
How much is that worth, Scott? do you know?
Oh my god.
I didn't look it up. I'm not a car person.
Are we in the millions?
It's
Probably.
it's a Ferrari.
It's a Ferrari. So
Okay.
just think of big number.
Yeah.
That's basically what it
Safe
is.
Yeah.
bet. He is the founder of id, right? John Carmack. Am I crazy?
Might
I don't know. Look
be.
it up.
I mean, it makes
You got a
sense.
phone in your
It's
hand?
kind of cool that id, who is essentially the creator of the first person shooter, is the one pushing this initial event.
Yeah,
It makes
And
sense.
so 1997 is kind of where we get to with that. That's where esports really started. That's the date that a lot of people will point back to and say this is where it all began, right? Everything before that was building to it, but it wasn't esports until the Red Annihilation tournament. So you can thank Microsoft for esports today,
I mean,
to a degree.
Thanks,
Also,
Microsoft.
From my reading, though, it seems like CPL had a big part to play in it. 'Cause-
So CPL becomes a pretty big deal in the next several years. CPL is what built it from there. Microsoft sponsored one big tournament that got a lot of attention. But yeah, CPL has a lot of competitions for quite a few years. But before we touch on that, right, so we've gotten to the beginning of esports. And we could probably continue on to shooters right now, but I think it's also a good time to step into the fighting game arena, because my understanding is that the fighting game community has tended to distance itself from the esports title. And so I think it would be kind of smart to start there and kind of talk about a different kind of competitive world, and then kind of make our way back into shooters as sort of an intro to the, connecting back to RTS and MOBA later on.
It works chronologically too, because fighting games obviously have their roots in arcades.
Right.
So you can start there and talk about people putting up their quarters on the cabinets, waiting for the next game. And unlike playing games at home with people you're in an arcade. That's the best chance you're going to get to play with complete strangers and really test your skill. And you can kind of see how that would form the trajectory for what esports would become later on.
Mm-hmm. It kind of, because it started in arcades, the first game that really kind of sanctioned the whole tournament play was Street Fighter.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it.
Because I was reading a lot about this, but there were a ton of arcade games. One of the first ones was called Karate Champ Heavyweight Champ in 1976. It was one of the first fighting games.
I
on
remember
arcade.
a fighting game called Pit Fighter 2 that was right there at the beginning.
Yeah,
I saw that at arcades when I was a kid.
Yeah, it was one of the first ones. Why would you do
that
that?
was a complete accident. I
Look,
apologize.
my dude. Calm yourself.
He was signaling the change to the
I
next
guess,
segment.
yeah.
This bell has been calling my name ever since I saw it.
Stop
so
it. We don't need that in another
sorry.
show.
You're gonna have to sit in another chair next time, so
yeah.
you can't reach the
This
bell.
is my spot.
We need to put you in the corner, even though you kind of already are. But anyway, so yeah, they had fighting games in arcades. You know, none of them were really like crazy, but Street Fighter's kind of exploded.
One thing I want to mention,
Yeah.
which is kind of odd, Mortal Kombat was huge back then,
Yeah.
and it totally took the arcade scene by storm. But as we talk about fighting games in esports and tournaments that would follow, you're not going to hear Mortal Kombat brought up much.
No.
I don't know exactly why that is, because I don't know a whole lot about the subtlety of fighting games at a high level play.
I think
Maybe
it had
it's
to do
like
with, like, the
juggles and
violence.
blocks. And you think so?
I think it absolutely had to do with the violence and stuff.
I mean,
and
even now though, they play all kinds of fighting games in tournaments, and you still don't see Mortal Kombat represented.
I mean,
Fair
Mortal Kombat is the fighting game that was all about gore. Like, I've watched people play Tekken and Street Fighter and a bunch of games, and like, sure, there's blood sometimes, but there's blood, not someone ripping someone else's spine out through their neck. Like,
Yeah, it could be as simple as that.
fair enough.
And like the most recent Mortal Kombat releases, like go out of their way to make that even more visceral and graphic. And like, if that's your thing, like it's really cool. It's not really my thing, but I can understand.
It's a
why
very
someone-
niche thing.
Yeah.
It's a very niche thing.
But
if you're not into it,
again,
you're not.
people loved it in arcades, so
Yeah.
it's just a little surprising that it didn't catch on. I guess for like broadcast for tournaments, when lots of people are watching, it makes sense why they wouldn't want to have that.
Yeah, have like
in the
little
light.
4-year-olds watching someone get their back like ripped out of the like straight from
Yeah,
their back.
right.
But yeah, it was kind of Street Fighter introduced special attack or like hidden special attacks into combat games. I found this really interesting, and there was combos and things like that in fighters before it, but Street Fighter 2 is the one that really refined and defined it all.
And that's also the game that more or less started the actual tournament
yes,
scene.
absolutely.
So when was that?
Well,
1991.
I should say this. No, 1996 is what I came up with. Like the first
Okay.
actual sponsored Street
sponsored.
Fighter
I'm
tournament.
just talking about when Street Fighter 2 came out.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
1991 is when
Probably
Street
right.
Fighter
Okay.
2 came out,
And then you're saying it's mid 90s, 96 is when it really started to take off
And
as
that was-
a competitive atmosphere.
Right. That was a specific tournament that took place, which would eventually go on to become Evo.
yeah,
Right.
Which
And
is, to this
I-
day, about the biggest fighting game tournament there is worldwide.
yeah,
Yeah, I didn't run into Evo until 2002 in where I
Right.
was looking at, but I also was not looking at stuff that was focusing on fighting games.
2002 is
So-
when it really took off.
So this
Right.
tournament in 1996 was called Battle by the Bay.
yes, I
there were-
read that too.
There was 40 entrants, and it took place in California. This was 1996. They played on arcade cabinets, which would eventually change to. They played Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Street Fighter Alpha 2, and that I guess that tournament went on consecutively for about 6 years until 2002, and then the tournament was actually rebranded as Evo or Evolution Championship Series.
Yep.
So yeah, at that point they moved to Vegas. They started adding more games to the tournament, and of course there was many more attendees at this point. So beyond Street Fighter, they added games like Marvel vs. Capcom,
Tekken 2, Killer
Tekken,
Instinct.
Soul Calibur,
Yep.
Guilty Gear, even
Yep.
some crazy Japanese games.
And Super Smash Brothers.
Much later, yeah, you would
But,
see
yeah.
Super Smash Bros. join as well.
2007, a long time.
Yeah,
But I guess Smash, came out. I don't even know when Smash came out. Actually, sorry.
you don't know when when
Not
Melee
off the
came
top of
out?
my head.
We should know this.
I know Smash Brothers came out, but that was, I don't want to say it was popular, but I don't think it was something that people really thought, we'll see this game in Evo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So something that's kind of funny is there was sort of a return to form to Street Fighter focused tournaments because eventually Capcom started a separate tournament called Capcom Cup, and it was much later. That was in 2013, but clearly there was a desire for like Street Fighter purists to still have a tournament of their own.
Yeah.
Because so many other games had been added to the equation by this point.
A lot of people didn't even play. I was listening to an interview, and a lot of people, when the newer Street Fighters came out to arcades and stuff, they didn't even want to touch it because people were so focused on their one.
Is this Street Fighter 4?
No. Street Fighter 3 came out in
Okay.
arcades, and people didn't even want to touch it because they were so wrapped up in Street Fighter 2.
Right.
So
I don't think it was until 4 that there was
was
really like a move away
huge.
from 2 in
Yep.
any significant way.
4 was the one that kind of solidified its history.
Yeah.
Almost in like esports.
So yeah, they moved away from arcade cabinets in the probably the early 2000s too. So now they're playing on consoles, PS3 mostly, I believe.
In
And
the early 2000s.
yeah,
Okay.
mid 2000s.
Yeah.
And so this tournament's still going on today. Evo 2017, I pulled up some statistics for how that looked just recently. There was over 10,000 people registered as participants in the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as broadcasts go, the finals of the tournament are broadcast on ESPN2. You kind of already mentioned that.
Yeah.
And Disney XD.
Yep.
And
really?
then, yep.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep. And then there's a ton of Twitch streams. There's like 6 official Twitch streams that broadcast the tournament, and then a bunch of the games developers would have their own specific streams dedicated to their games as well.
The thing I do want to mention before we get too far away from it, that 10,000 plus people that signed up for it, Evo is very, very open to its community. And they honestly, when you think of esports, you think you have to be on a team, you have to have a manager and someone to sign up for these massive events. And for a lot of esports games, that's true. But for Evo, they're very like, hey, if you think you're good enough, we want you in this tournament. So they'll honestly let anyone sign up for a tournament, and they just go through the motions of eliminating people. Mm-hmm. But you could literally have Joe Blow from down south, coming up to play in his first ever tournament ever and take first place.
Yeah.
And beat professionals that have been doing it since the beginning. So it's just kind of cool. I think Evo has a really nice formula, and I think that's really cool to the community, that it allows you this chance to basically get a career out of this, So.
I did notice that most of the participants were either from here in America, Japan, and a few from Canada. So while it's open internationally, you don't see a lot of European countries
That's something
showing
that I
interest
saw
in it.
actually too. That was something that was mentioned, is that fighting games got big in America and they got big in Japan.
Yep.
And not really anywhere else.
Are they playing like Street Fighter in Japan though, I wonder? Or is it more like
Tekken?
I think they played
Tekken, Soul
the
Calibur.
same set of games.
I wouldn't
Okay.
say Soul Calibur. They're more. What I've noticed, I should say. I'm not saying that this is definitive. A lot
And
of
I know less than Scott does.
yeah, a lot of 2D,
Disclaimer.
a lot of 2D games, fighting style at least.
So probably like the Marvel versus
Yes.
Capcoms.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Crazy over the top juggling for 35 minutes.
Don't tell
A
me you're
single
not
match.
impressed by that. Don't tell me you're
It's
not
amazing.
impressed.
It's
It is.
amazing to watch. I cannot wrap my head around how that's controlled, but it's cool to watch.
I try not to think about it too much.
So in 2017, the top prize pools for winners at the tournament range from $50,000 to $100,000, and that probably sounds like a drop in the bucket compared to some of the bigger tournaments for like MOBAs and strategy games, I guess these days.
Yeah.
But remember,
it does.
these are individual players, whereas with those tournaments, we're talking about teams. So I mean, you average that out, it may be in the same ballpark. I don't know, but these are probably much smaller tournaments in terms of attendees and viewership too. So.
Yeah.
And then we should also talk about Apex a little bit, which is a Smash Bros. Focused tournament. That is, it's a more recent thing. Oh, I guess I should say this too. Nintendo actually sponsored Evo officially in, I think, 2015, which was the year Smash 4 came along. So the Smash community, Dan, can you help me out with this? The Smash community has kind of always been a little...
Wait, why can't I help you out?
I don't know.
I'm the
I
Smash
guess
player
I've had
here.
this conversation with Dan before.
I'll help
That's
out
fine.
first, and then Scott can
Yes,
jump in and
please.
just go
I
to
don't.
town.
I don't care.
And then I'll just sit here and listen.
They've always
Okay,
been
cool.
a little like bothered that Nintendo won't step up and formally either host or give them a tournament of their own, like a lot of
kinda.
developers tend to do.
Yeah, so this is something that I ran into. I never dug into it. I never really found a place to do so anyway. Nintendo, for a while, was, depending on your perspective, almost anti-esport. Like I said, that's literally, I just saw people say that. I have no idea why they say that.
I mean, it
don't
could
know
just
what-
mean they weren't doing anything pro esport.
Right, it seemed
I'll tell you
it seemed
why.
like there was more of a negative aspect to it. But
Okay.
It's so the other thing that I think is important to acknowledge in terms of the Super Smash Bros. Community, and Scott will back me up on this one, I'm pretty sure, is that the GameCube version, Melee, it is competitively sound. There's a lot of tech that you can do in the game that's very difficult to do until you've practiced it a lot.
Yeah.
And then you move on to the version that they release on the Wii, and
This is Brawl.
and it's floaty. A lot of that tech is just gone.
Yep.
There's tripping all of a sudden is involved. I think that's when they
That was in
introduced
Brawl.
the Smash Ball.
Yep, that was in Brawl. Yep.
So there's all these things that are just like, they're oriented towards making the game chaotic, which for a lot of people is what they play Super Smash Brothers for, right? You turn on all the items and you turn up the damage and all
You
this
just have
stuff,
fun.
right?
Yeah.
And you just have fun, throwing the pink glowy swords at each other. But like,
Do you have some recollection of that? Is that why you specifically said that?
I actually preferred playing without items.
I did too.
But
Final
I also
Destination.
never got into that.
No
tech
items, Fox
because I
only,
skipped
Final
the
Destination.
GameCube. But in any case, all of that time that they'd spent practicing, right? All this time they'd spent playing this game and like developing all of this talent really is wasted because now they have a game. Not only do they have a game where they'd have to relearn all of that, which is bad enough, but people put up with it and they'll do it. They have a game you can't actually do that in because tripping. I mean, you can turn off Smash Balls, you can turn off a variety of things, but tripping is just it's going to happen sometimes to some characters, and it feels bad because you have no control.
Yeah.
The floatiness of the game is very different from Melee. I have a hard time going back and playing Melee because I played Brawl first.
Yeah.
And so I go
Did you
back and
really?
like everything's heavy, they fall super
Interesting.
fast. It's just all this stuff. It's very different feel.
Yeah.
And so the community's solution to this was they went and created their own game.
Yeah,
essentially.
Project M, if you've
Project
never heard of
M.
it, is them just modding.
It was a thing.
It was
it's no
a thing.
longer a
Is
thing.
it no longer a
Sure.
thing?
No.
So it was a thing on Super Smash Brothers Brawl where they tried to take all the characters and make them
Better.
Feel more like Melee.
feel more like Melee.
Essentially.
They basically
So.
wanted to take Brawl, which people wanted to play, but they wanted it to be Melee, and that's what Project M was. I think that's why I like all the different Smash games, is because Dan's right. They're all very different. You can't play Melee and expect to be good at Brawl, and you can't play Brawl and expect to be good at the Nintendo 64 version, because they on the outside, all look like the same updated game, updated graphics, updated characters,
But
blah, 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 blah.
they're definitely not.
When you look
Yeah.
on the inside of the game, they are vastly different, and it is incredible watching people play the game.
I played a lot of Fox in the 64 version. When I finally got my hands on Melee and tried playing around with it, I mean, I couldn't play anyone well, but I definitely couldn't play Fox well. Like, just it was a huge difference.
Yeah.
And then I get to Brawl, and it's like, oh, I'll play Lucario and Lucas and like other random
characters, yeah.
right? Toon Link, like those were the three characters I played a ton of in Brawl, and like totally different from Fox. But
Yeah.
You actually mentioned you like playing with the Wii Emote nunchuck combo too, which is
Yeah.
crazy to
Disgusting.
me.
You were disgusting.
I don't know how I got to that, but I did. I don't know.
I just want to mention, like, I actually used to play competitively Super Smash Brothers Brawl. I used to be on a team, and I would compete in tournaments. So back in the day, so this game kind of holds a special place in my heart. So I would actually really like to go to Apex.
Well, Apex is not really a major event anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's probably still going on in some capacity, but the fact that Nintendo now sponsors EVO and sanctions participation heavily at EVO, I guess means that focus has been largely taken off of Apex.
I'm excited for some of my friends to listen to this episode so that they can tell me like, what points did we miss? And like, especially with Super Smash Brothers,
Oh, no
I
doubt.
know multiple people who like were laddering, at least in Washington State, and like ranked highly. Their gamer tag would be recognized by other people who played Smash. Like, and they could go on for hours. They have. My friend Cooper is great about that. He loves. I love talking to Cooper because he will just keep going.
Yeah.
But anyway.
A little more about Apex, I guess. It's been called the Super Bowl of Super Smash Bros.
Yeah.
Started in 2009, and it was just Melee and Brawl at that point, which is interesting because I guess you probably had people that just vastly preferred one or the other, so they incorporated both of them. Project M actually was incorporated as a part of the event at one point.
2013.
13, yeah, and probably 14 as well, because in 15 Nintendo became an
Dropped
official sponsor of the event.
They didn't
and I'm
want
sure
that
Project
modding
M would not
garbage.
be.
Is that why Project M is now defunct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That-
You can still get it, but
Right. But
there's no
it's not
updates.
officially sponsored, and they're not updating.
It's never been officially sponsored.
Well,
but
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, but they dropped it, and
Well, also that's right around when Smash 4 came out, and I don't know that completely negates the need for for Project M.
I guess
but-
the thing, I have no idea what Smash 4 did in the sense of like, what did it fix anything?
it
that
did. Yeah,
3 did?
They basically
know.
they made the Wii U version. They essentially heard the complaints of people, saying the floatiness of Brawl and the tripping and just little details like that, and they were like, okay, let's make the best of both worlds, and essentially took Melee and Brawl and kind of mixed it into one, and they came up with the Wii U version,
Okay.
which I've seen competitive play of. One of my friends is he's not a professional gamer by any
Right.
means, but he's really, really good at the game. And watching him play is insane. I can't do that stuff. I used to be
Yeah.
able to do it in Brawl, but that was a long, long time ago.
And I remember playing Super Smash Brothers 4, and it felt like a more natural flow. Like going from 64 to Melee would have been a pretty big difference. Going from Melee to Brawl or back is a very big difference. But then Brawl to Super Smash Brothers 4 was it was very natural. And I mean, that's me as a casual Super Smash Brothers player, but
It's clear looking at Smash 4 too that Nintendo was positioning it as a esports, or at least a high competitive game, because you have things like all the variations of Final Destination. So you can play on various maps, but you're still playing Final Destination, which doesn't have all the variables, and then obviously items off. Or there's a specific mode in this game for Glory where it'll tie you to Final Destination and no items. So
Yeah.
they positioned it to be played at a high level,
Which is-
whether it came across that way or not.
now that's amusing to me based on my understanding of kind of the culture of the fighting game community, which we haven't touched on very much. Now this is explained to me by like one friend. So if I am wrong, someone listening to this, please like contact us and correct me. But I've been told that the fighting game community to the rest of esports is like professional wrestling. Right? So they have real matches. They'll go and they'll have these matches, but like they'll make a huge deal out of it. They'll have a couch sitting in front of the TV, and like someone will challenge someone else to a money match because some grudge that they hold from years past, and the guy will show up and he'll like walk in with all this like attitude and sits down
Smoke machines.
and
He'll
has
have
his
his-
own controller, right? And
Yeah.
he'll sit down, he'll plug it in, and they'll like stare it down or whatever. I've never watched it, but it sounds kind of fascinating.
Matches
Yeah.
over, they pull out a folding chair. And
Get each other over the head.
yeah, like I don't know that that's actually happened, but if someone told
You'd
me it
believe
had,
me.
I'd believe them.
Yeah.
And I've seen some clips of this stuff. Like I've seen clips of these guys that they're literally shouting at each other in hotel lobbies with, surrounded by like other people who are at a convention with them, just like you would expect to see professional wrestlers shout at each other in professional wrestling.
So
might be fun to watch just for that reason.
yeah.
can we say that fighting games are definitively less popular than
I wouldn't say
shooters, MOBAs?
definitively.
I don't know that
RTS.
I would say that.
then MOBAs and RTS?
Yeah,
yes.
than the rest
Oh,
of
Yes.
esports.
Yeah. But they're still very much a part of it. I don't mean to keep rushing, but I do want to get to shooting games. So let's
Yeah,
let's do it.
we're pretty close there.
Yeah. So basically, Smash had its own tournament. Apex started in 2009. About 2000, what was it? 15. They had a bunch of controversy going on, loss of venue and stuff like that. And
When
then
did MLG form?
MLG?
Yeah.
2002.
Yeah.
I have
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah, and MLG. It's relevant to both of these. MLG formed in 2002, and their initial focus was on Super Smash Brothers.
Yeah.
And also Halo.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. I'm just trying to get through this real fast because
Yeah, of
I do want to get to shooting before we have to rush that too. Apex lost a ton of viewership. It lost a ton of players who would compete in it. And 2016, it looks like kind of the last run of Apex.
Something else happened in 2015, I believe. Nintendo brought back the Nintendo World Championships Or was that 14?
They
It was
did
one of
have
those
that.
years.
I don't remember what year that.
I think it was 15.
Yeah, I think it was
Okay.
15 too, because I feel like it's a little more recent than that.
Which was similar to the event back in 1990. It was a cross section of a bunch of games that people would compete in.
I know
And then
my impression of it was very much is not quite a nostalgia grab, but like a remember we did this thing.
Yeah.
We're going to do that thing again. But
that's kind of a thing they've been doing.
updated.
It at E3. They'll host some other weird event. And then the year before, I want to say they actually hosted a Smash Bros. Invitational, which was largely kind of a marketing thing for their new game. But I mean, it was, I guess, the first Nintendo sanctioned Smash Bros. Tournament.
Yeah.
And it was just that. It was an event at E3 that came and went, but it was fun to watch. People got excited about it.
Yeah,
And it was the
definitely.
first place to really see a lot of that game before it released. So
Yeah.
So while
Do we
we're
have anything to talk about Evo before we finish up? We talked about Apex.
Oh, yeah, we did kinda skip over
we
Evo
kind of
mostly.
like stopped at the beginning of Evo.
well, I
but
kind of I
just brush
ran
over.
through the stats at the end of Evo 2017.
Oh, did you?
I don't have a much on the progression, but
I have
it's still very popular.
One thing about Evo that
Yeah.
I happen to run into, not huge detail, but that the first like Evo event was in 2002. It had predecessor events that were basically Evo, but at that event, it was Marvel versus Capcom 2. It looks like was the big
the
deal.
big one. Yeah, it just
Yeah.
came out. So, and then that was when they moved it to Las Vegas, Nevada.
Yeah.
and they've had it there ever since. And
Yep.
then
So- and-
Mandalay or MGM Resort Ballroom.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and so that kind of, I guess, illustrates something that I think is interesting about fighting games compared to the other three big genres we're talking about, is the high number of different games that people play. There's a lot of different fighting games that people learn how to play and that are, I guess, competitively. What's the word I'm looking for?
I don't know.
Different.
They have competitive integrity in terms of like the balance of the game, right?
Yeah.
And I've probably heard dozens of different fighting game names that like I recognize, and you know we're on what Tekken 35 now or whatever.
it's up there,
Close enough.
7 or 8.
Whereas in the research that I've done, I've seen like probably 5 or 6 different real-time strategies. I know that currently there are probably anywhere from 3 to 4 viable like MOBA audiences at any given time, and probably 5 or 6 games have been big. There's basically just 3, maybe 4 shooters that have ever been a big deal, at least franchise-wise. But you have all of these fighting games.
Yeah, a
It's
lot.
interesting. I think it's an interesting, different dynamic.
I'm just gonna quickly just name off a list of a ton of just games.
Yeah.
Street Fighter, of course. You have Tekken. You have King of Fighters, Mortal Kombat, Pokken, Marvel vs. Capcom, Soul Calibur, Smash Brothers, Guilty Gear, Skullgirls too. So on and so forth. There's so many fighting games out there that
And, like
are
I've never played any of those,
Yeah.
and yet I've heard of all of them.
yeah, and they're all being played competitively.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a lot of. You were talking about shooters. You said like 4 or 5 shooters.
There's like 4.
I think that's a good segue to kind of get into it because I know the
Yeah.
Overwatch League is going on right now.
It is.
So I know that that's going on right now currently. So, but you know, kind of get into the history of shooters in esports. Let's go back because I know that shooters have been around for a long time.
Right. Yeah. So that starts with. I don't know if Quake is technically the first shooter. Brittin, do you know?
Shooting-
Wolfenstein, I believe.
You're right.
Was the
Actually,
first
yeah,
FPS.
I did see that. Wolfenstein is the very first FPS.
It was id though, same company,
Yeah,
And
and so and
very
Quake,
close
Quake
in
was
timing.
id. Quake was also
right?
id.
And Doom was around
So
that time as
yeah,
well.
you were right about that John Carmack thing that he was part of it because he was the lead developer for Quake.
Sounds right.
So 1997, Red Annihilation, Microsoft sponsored tournament. It was a Quake tournament. It was at E3, which at the time was like the only only major video game expo in North America.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I know that there are big events in Europe now that are like as big or bigger than
Gamescom,
E3.
there's Tokyo Game Show.
But
I think
I don't
E3
actually know the
predates them.
history of whether those are
There's Insomnia as
at
well.
this point in 97. So
Okay.
Oh, yeah, so in 97, that kind of marks the beginning of these organizations that we were talking about earlier. So you have the Cyber Athlete Professional League. It hosted its first event just a few months later, so in October. So what is that from June? Like 4 months later, 5 months later, something like that. So they held an event called The Frag. It's prizes were like merchandise worth about $4,000. But a year later, the Frag 2, that tournament, had something like $15,000 in prize money, which is a pretty big jump up. And it's also notable that that tournament wasn't notable because other organizations were setting up similarly sized and prized tournaments. So that was beginning to be a thing. And this is still kind of general history, I guess. But then you have a few years later is another kind of major tournament. The Razer CPL event is the first one that goes kind of above that mark. So this is April in 2000 that we're talking about now. It's a Quake 3 tournament once again. This one has an overall prize pool of $100,000. Mm-hmm. So that's split between a bunch of different places. But first place ended up getting $40,000. And the guy who did it, Jonathan, it's Fatality with a 1 instead of an I.
Fatality. He was like the original poster boy for online or esports gaming.
Yeah.
Competitive online gaming.
So Jonathan Wendell is the guy who took first place. And he got $102,000 that year in prize money at various tournaments.
He was probably the first to get like sponsorships too from like peripheral makers and stuff like that.
I do run into some sponsorship stuff during kind of my research here, but it was more in the context of like sponsoring teams and sponsoring tournaments and stuff.
Okay.
So also in 2000, you see, we'll talk about this more next time, but that's where you see StarCraft Brood War really start to take off in Korea because you have the Korean Esports Association. The Korean Esports Players Association. So that is a government-approved organization in Korea, in South Korea, that still functions today, I believe. And it's basically there to as sort of like an official recognition of esports and that this is a thing that is worth paying attention to and making sure that it functions well. I'm sure that that's not quite exactly what they're designed to do, but it's definitely it's the government acknowledging that esports is a thing, which doesn't happen anywhere else for probably a decade.
And in Korea, that's kind of where it all started, isn't it?
Where you have
national pride related to esports kind of thing,
where you step beyond just tournaments and start going into like real like continuing like careers in professional video game playing. Because before that, I don't think it's really viable for the vast majority of people to try to make a living off of video games, right? Because you have these tournaments that have $15,000 prizes, but how many of them can you go to, and how many of them can you guarantee that you place high enough to get anything significant?
And how much can you actually guarantee that you're going to get that money?
Right. And so that's hard to do, but this is kind of the first step. Korea doing that.
Kind of reminds me of golf.
Yeah.
There's a very few players at the I wish. Few players at the top levels that walk away from these tournaments with money and can make it a viable career.
Right. You'd be surprised in Korea how many teams are very viable at making a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, these days, no doubt.
Yeah.
So then we also have, in about the same time of year in 2000, Turtle Entertainment is born. Now, that's not a name that I know, but it is a parent company for the first name that I recognized on this list, just right off the bat, the Electronic Sports League. And that was in Germany, I believe. Yeah, in Germany. Today, it's Europe's biggest esports league. So that's
ESL.
ESL. They sponsor a lot of events. I hear about it all the time with league stuff. I know before Riot really like took over running all of the professional tournament stuff, there were ESL events that had league stuff. I think there still might be. But yeah, so pretty big deal. And of course, they run the other big games too. They have a lot of events. So that started in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
They were. Does it say here? No, it doesn't. But they were kind of the one of the big figures in turning professional video game stuff from a hobby into a real like business venture, which is kind of that turning point that you need in esports for it to be sustainable. Because no one's going to play for longer than a year or two if you can't earn enough money to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So you
Just
need
like
to
any
have that
career,
income. Right? Mm-hmm. Let's see here.
So when do we get to like Counter-Strike and some of the shooters that factor into
the defining?
Counter-Strike also
the defining
came out
shooters.
in 2000. 2000 was a big year, I guess, in that way. Before Counter-Strike, you mostly had Quake 3, and
Unreal
eventually
Tournament,
Quake 4.
Sorry.
Unreal Tournament shows up here too in the same kind of early 2000s bracket.
Yeah.
A lot of these tournaments will have one or two or sometimes all three of those running at the same time. Counter-Strike didn't immediately take off. So for those who don't know, Counter-Strike was originally a mod for Half-Life. And what ended up happening is Valve saw that and they said, you guys are pretty cool. What if we hired you to make this like a real game? So they did that, and then Counter-Strike released about a year later after it had become a mod.
Yep.
And it was immediately very popular.
Yeah. Not only because it was
I actually
a new
don't
game.
know if I have a source on that.
Not
But
only because it was a new game, but people who played it previous wanted to be a part of that. So,
right. And this is also the kind of the time in history when Valve was really starting to gain some traction.
Yep. With Half-Life.
You know,
and
I mean,
everything.
these days we look at Valve and we're like, oh, you have the Portal franchise and you have the Half-Life franchise. You did the Orange Box back in the day. Like,
believe
these
it
are
or
all
not.
so cool. And like, I mean, we were saying that 10 years ago too. You know, so they haven't done as much lately. But at the time, they were gearing up for all of that.
Well, Valve will get a lot of talk in our next episode too. We get to MOBAs, no doubt.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Dota 2.
I'm so excited.
So, and then a couple of years later, you see another organization appear in North America, MLG, Major League Gaming. This is something I actually went to an MLG event. I think it was my first like live gaming event that I went to in Texas, Dallas or Houston or one of those major cities down there. I was actually down there for a choir convention with the choir that I sang with in college. And we did some really cool stuff there. It was a really great trip for that. But on one of the days, we had the entire day free, and the hotel that they had put us up in was a hotel that was hosting an MLG event that
What are the
weekend.
odds?
So I walked downstairs and was like, what does it cost to get in? It was like $50 or something.
Was it just a few of the ballrooms at the hotel or something like that?
Yeah, it was,
Yeah.
it was a few ballrooms, I think, opened up into each other. And they had League of Legends going. They had StarCraft going. I think they had Counter-Strike. So, yeah, it was a cool thing to
Sounds
go
like
do.
fun. Yeah.
So anyway, that starts in 2002. They kind of focused on Halo early on, which it doesn't get a whole lot of mention necessarily, but it did gain some traction in America, is my understanding. It's the only console first-person shooter that really does much of that, I think. Although you guys have mentioned Call of Duty, and like clearly that's something that I completely missed along the way. I didn't realize that it had any sort of esports scene. And I don't know.
This would have been
maybe it doesn't have
much
a super-
later, I think. I don't think
Right.
the early Call of Duty games
I mean,
had
we're
that
still
kind
early
of impact.
2000s. So a lot of what I found from here on out is just it's little details, and like, you know, we can talk about specific organizations that I recognize. I saw SK Gaming, founded in 2003. Founded in 1997. It becomes SK Gaming along the way. That's an organization that has teams in sports today, esports. I know they had an EU league team for a while. I think they still do. I don't know. I don't pay attention to EU at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's a lot of that stuff going on here.
It's pretty clear that there's not as much to say about shooters in esports, which is odd to me because it is so competitive, and
would
it
think.
can
I
be
mean,
team-based, it can be FFA. It's odd to me that it hasn't encompassed more of the esports scene.
The thing is, I'm sure that to a degree it has. I don't really play a lot of shooters. You know, I'm doing this research based on basically stuff other people are saying.
Well, sure, people are playing these games
I only
online.
have so much insight that way.
But
And I'm
what-
sure that if I'd been following Counter-Strike along the way, I mean, that's something that I would have noticed.
I mean, does Valve host a big tournament for Counter-Strike, for example?
I don't
I
think
didn't come
Valve
across
does,
anything
but
like that.
In the early to mid 2000s, there's a shift gradually where Quake starts to lose momentum and Counter-Strike starts to take over.
Well, if you go from, like Brittin, an FFA type game to team-based, and people start forming their own teams and start, being competitive in it.
No, and I think that's probably part of the draw too. That was something that, not having played Counter-Strike before, I did have to look up like how is Counter-Strike played and what happens. And for those who don't know, Quake was, as we've decided, basically,
I'm pretty confident.
It was a free-for-all arena, just deathmatch kind of game. So you're in a level with 16 or 30 or whatever some number of people, and the goal is to be the last one alive.
There's randomly spawning weapons floating around that you just
Right.
pick up. There's health packs. I
It
think
can be kind
sometimes,
of chaotic.
armor
I have
packs.
seen people play some Unreal Tournament. I don't know if their
Unreal
competitive
Tournament's
format was the
fantastic.
same way, but I've seen them have that very game mode essentially.
It's either that or capture the flag
Right.
in Unreal Tournament.
So Call of Duty, Counter-Strike is based on a few specific objectives. So you have terrorists and you have counter-terrorists. And I think there were 3 main game modes that I read about. One is that there's a bomb that the terrorists have set, and the counter-terrorists have to try to defuse. And if they don't do it in time, then they lose, and the terrorists win. Similarly, there's a hostage situation, which pretty much they have to rescue the hostages in time, or the terrorists win. Please, no one take this out of context.
I think a little side note though is that the terrorist one was on the very first rendition of Counter-Strike. Not CS:GO.
Was bomb defusal added later?
No,
that
that
what
was
you're saying?
there as well, but I think they took the terrorist part out of CS:GO because all like the competitive play I've watched for CS:GO doesn't have taking hostages or rescuing hostages.
right.
Interesting.
in it.
Okay. What is the current format then?
I think
It's
just
bomb.
It's just the bomb.
It's
just
the
the
bomb.
Oh,
Just
okay.
the bomb.
Just the bomb.
Yeah, so throughout all this time, right, we basically have a transfer from Quake being the main game played to Counter-Strike. And there's some other things that are mentioned. Unreal Tournament comes up. I think I saw Unreal Tournament 2003 was played at some events. Halo gets mentioned a few times. It gains some traction in America, like I said before, but not a lot beyond that. Also, what you see a lot of is Counter-Strike coexisting alongside StarCraft, or later on Warcraft 3. That are, I mean, we'll talk about that more next time, but it's definitely, it becomes kind of one of the big 2 genres
Can I ask a question
that
real quick?
later will be the big 3 once MOBAs kind of hit the scene.
So is Warcraft a RTS?
Yeah. So this,
I have no knowledge on Warcraft whatsoever.
Well, that's why we have next
Yeah.
week's episode to
Yeah,
talk about
we'll
it.
get
we're
there.
going to be teaching it. We will touch a little bit on it today, just because of the relation to Overwatch. Which, I mean, I'm kind of scrolling through my notes here. There's not a lot. I mean, there's a lot of things that I think that fans of shooter games are not going to be a big fan of. That me just skipping on them. But this stuff happens.
When did Call of Duty 4 hit Modern Warfare?
I don't have
Ooh.
I don't have a date for
I want to
that.
say 06, 07.
I believe that was kind of the game that put Call of Duty on the map in a competitive
was
way, and it
huge.
sort of reinvented the way shooters could be played at a competitive level, because you had the whole leveling system, you had picking different perks,
Exactly.
you had more interesting map design than we had seen before, I think, in other shooters. So that's when Call of Duty started to kind of spread its wings, but I don't know that it really took off as an esport at any point. Do you guys know much about Call of Duty being played competitively?
I honestly, I don't. I know it is definitely considered an esports game.
I think it's just very niche. Like it's very
I wouldn't even say
specific.
niche.
Actually, I would say kind of the opposite. Call of Duty Modern Warfare is a game that I've always had the impression it was like, that's the reason people like Call of Duty, and then people continue playing it because it doesn't change that much from
they've
iteration to iteration.
They've been evolving that formula essentially.
But
for
that's the formula they
10
hit
entries
that
now.
worked. So when it was Call of Duty Modern Warfare, it was great because it was new or fresh, maybe.
sure.
But yeah, it doesn't come up much when you're looking at esports stuff. You know, all these tournaments here, it's like you have pick 2 of like 10 different games, and then also add on Warcraft 3 or StarCraft if you're in South Korea, and Counter-Strike. You know, past about 2006, you don't really see Quake being played anymore.
Are the older versions of Counter-Strike still being played, or is it all CS:GO at this point?
it's
So
all
that's something that I
CS:GO.
ran into when CS:GO came out. They didn't like a lot of the community didn't like it and would continue playing. I think it's
1.6 or something.
1.6 was the version that they stuck to for a while. I've also seen reference to at least a couple things that I wasn't aware existed, and I don't know what they mean. Counter-Strike female. Never heard of it
What's
before.
that, Dan?
I don't know, but there was a tournament that featured it as one of
Okay.
the main games
Okay.
being played at it. What is that? I don't know the difference, but it's a thing.
One's for girls and the other's for guys. Why are you so
Clearly.
two-sided, Dan? Why are
Mr.
you
Binary
assuming?
over here.
Yeah, come on. What's going on?
We could
I'm
fast forward a
sorry,
bit here and throw to Zach and
Yeah,
talk about
so-
where we're at now with shooters
Just
and
making sure that I'm not missing
esports.
anything like super major.
Okay.
But I think it's we can basically follow Counter-Strike from there all the way up to the modern day. So Counter-Strike is these days, my understanding, because of the advertisements I see, it is alongside League of Legends and Dota, Dota 2. Is StarCraft 2 big these days?
Yes.
Okay.
Very much so.
Okay.
Still
Yeah,
played over
I
in Korea. and
skipped
still
over
played
so
here.
much of the RTS stuff because I'm going to look at it
We're
for next
waiting.
week. But
Yep.
yeah, Counter-Strike basically stands alone as far as I could tell. Along
It was
the
essentially
way.
the forerunner of esports shooter games. It
Not
really
even the
is.
forerunner. It is the
Still
esports
today.
shooter game. I
Still
mean,
today.
starts in 2000. It's like you said, people are playing CS:GO now.
Mm-hmm.
So like eventually they decided to hop onto that train. But like it was Quake and then it was Counter-Strike,
Yeah.
and you have some honorable mentions to 2 or 3 other titles along the way.
That was always the game I wanted to play, but I was always scared to because I knew everyone in the game was way better than I could ever be.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll just never play this game.
That's why I don't play shooters in general.
fair enough. But Overwatch right
So
now.
Overwatch.
Yeah. Let Zach take this over.
I
Let the
will.
man
I
get
want
on
to give
some
like
mic.
one small amount of intro. Blizzard makes Overwatch. Blizzard also makes StarCraft and Warcraft, both of which have been like premier esports for a long time.
Yep.
You have Heroes of the Storm, which these days it's not one of the heavy hitters, but like you can pay attention to it just fine. It'll be
And
it'll be
Hearthstone.
worth your time.
Just an
And-
honorable mention.
Hearthstone, which we'll get into more next time.
has Blizzard made a fighting game? It seems like they almost have a monopoly. So
No.
They do have.
close.
There are 2 or 3 like super old games that they have that I don't.
the
like,
Lost Vikings.
Yeah, the Lost Vikings.
Games that
one
no one's
and a
ever heard
couple
of. Anyway, Zach,
But yeah.
tell us a little bit about Overwatch. What is your experience like watching so far?
Well, I mean, I've always been knowing of esports and that it's going on, but this is kind of like the first league to actually like, grab my attention. And then just talk to you guys about it. That this is like the first kind of formation of a location-based league with cities and different places around the world,
Which-
representing teams.
Yeah, hasn't really happened otherwise. I mean, you have German teams, but you have German teams that
Well, yeah.
import Swedish players.
So
and
I mean,
import American
previously
players.
talking to you guys, there's Overwatch World Cup, which would be the integration of teams from around the world that would enter, apply, or compete to get into the World Cup, and so on and so forth. And they would compete to win. But this one is completely funded by individuals, companies, and organizations to create teams. And then you have salaried players that are recruited and hired on to be on the teams themselves.
Yeah, and these aren't professional players. These are
No,
just kids.
I actually
playing the game.
no, I actually want to counter that.
Okay.
Because it's not.
Sorry.
It's actually top. I mean, as long as they fall within the age restriction, which is you have to be 17 or older, is the top
That's pretty.
top
That's
Overwatch
pretty common
players.
too. Most esports have that restriction.
Yeah. So top Overwatch players in the world are basically recruited to these teams here.
I mean, but what I'm saying is they aren't prior part of international teams
No,
like
no.
Liquid or like.
There's guys
things
from
like
like
that.
Cloud9.
I mean,
which I know of.
how new is Overwatch 2? That's
It's
part of it too.
2016.
Yeah.
I thought you were asking me when it came out.
Right. I mean, but I am though, and I mean it's because as a shooter, and I mean Zach can speak a little more to this. It exists in between the space of something like Counter-Strike or Call of Duty that is super realistic, and something like Team Fortress 2
Yeah.
that's quite goofy when
Yeah.
it comes down to it.
But so far, watching the league, it's watching basically the meta and the tactics and seeing the overpowering skill of some of the teams out there. It's just astonishing to watch. So, like Seoul Dynasty, I think yesterday received their first loss of the season, and that's out of maybe 4 dozen games. So to see the skill level that the players are playing at
It's insane.
is insane.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
crazy because this is the first like real esports tournament that you've kind of watched, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And it is, I think the familiarity of location-based teams has really, like, drawn me in.
Yeah.
And then, with Blizzard signing deals with MLG, with Twitch, to stream the games and everything, it's really accessible.
What?
What do you have to say?
it really should be mentioned next time because it's more relevant for other things.
Okay. Twitch stuff.
We will have to talk about when Twitch
Yeah,
was founded
we will.
because that was another really pivotal moment in how esports.
Yep, absolutely.
about.
I have a
Absolutely.
dumb question, Zach.
Yeah, go
Twitch
ahead.
is a streaming platform. Yeah.
Thank you for that. How is first-person shooter broadcast? Like, what's the spectator mode like for a game like
So
that?
you know how during NFL games you have all these different cameras, all these different angles, everything like that. I believe because they show you behind the scenes. Basically, you have people behind the scenes operating the cameras, so they rotate the cameras in between players.
People are actually in real time trying to catch the action.
So,
They're-
so what you're
exactly.
saying
Wow.
is you're getting perspectives that you wouldn't ever get playing Overwatch.
Yeah, yeah.
You're
exactly.
essentially
That's
seeing
super cool.
between both teams first person's perspective of every single player. You're seeing what that player is looking at any given time. You're also
they're-
getting a top down view because
Yeah.
they're able to
Yep.
overview the camera over the shoulder type stuff. So it's
Everything you need to see.
So I
That's impressive.
haven't watched any Overwatch League yet, but like that right there, the fact that we'll be able to watch it like removed,
top down and
that
stuff. Yeah.
I'm already interested in at least checking out a few games.
But
Yeah,
they,
you should.
they very much broadcast it and promote it as as if it was the NFL or the MLB.
Oh, absolutely.
And they give you insight into the comms, so you get to listen to the teams a little bit and how they communicate. They do interviews on their tactics and their thoughts,
Yeah.
and they do highlights and replays, and it's a very familiar league to be introduced to and to follow.
The thing is that esports are, they are a sport, and as much as they don't want to admit it, it is. It does take a lot of practice and time. It as silly as it sounds, there are still injuries that happen. Yeah, people are like, oh, well, he's just typing on a keyboard, he's getting arthritis from it. It'd be the same as someone who's playing football who went to catch a ball out of the air and broke his spine.
And,
How ridiculous does that sound?
Other injuries that are completely unrelated can also seriously affect someone. There's a player in League of Legends, High, who a few years ago had a straight up collapsed lung and missed games because of that. Like
Yep. Yeah,
completely unrelated, but it was still. I mean,
It was
that's
a
an
big
injury,
deal. Yeah,
right?
exactly. So
and he also had some wrist things too, a couple times,
arthritis
but,
stuff, but I'm sure
tendonitis.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Well, it's just
arthritis is different.
it's just it's people need to start respecting esports for what it is. It's a sport, and honestly, in the next 5 to 10 years, I wouldn't be surprised if it's in the Olympic Games.
Haven't we been hearing that kind of talk for 5 to 10 years now?
It
though?
should be, even
Yeah.
if it's just Dota or League of Legends.
I think
I just feel like it
So it's
should
funny-
happen by this point if it was going to happen.
I
I
was
guess-
reading up a bit on the future of Overwatch, and it was the amount of teams they're looking to add. They're looking to make it home and away based, so teams fly to different locations, and they get to expand the teams worldwide.
And that'll be something that'll help the familiarity for people who aren't really that into video games. Because I mean, who do you root for in League of Legends? Where's Cloud9 from? Where's TSM from? Where's CLG from? Like the answer to every single one of these questions is going to be California. All like down the list the entire way. And that's not that interesting. Why are you rooting for this team from California instead of that team from California?
What they should
Right.
do
But-
is they should do what they do for the NBA when it comes to the Olympics. Get the best players in the world, put them on one team against another country. So like have the best players from the U.S. go against the best players from Korea. Why not? But I don't know.
I wanted to go back to something you said a moment ago about how you think that people need to respect esports as sports.
Yeah.
And I guess I do. I think I see where you're getting at with that, and in the kind of the general spirit of what you're saying, I agree. I also don't know that at least me personally, I don't know if I feel that it's that necessary to be recognized as a sport.
What I
And
mean.
there's some nuance there that I'm gonna have to figure out how to phrase it. Maybe we'll talk about it at the end of next episode.
Yeah. Or just talk about it
But
next episode in general.
At the very least, it's worth noting that is definitely a conversation that's being had right now. There are people who are just as emphatic or more emphatic than Scott was just now in saying, esports are sports, and there's no way to argue that. Ask just about anyone that is on ESPN, and they'll say, "What are video games?"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This is something that apparently shows up every so often. I
It
had someone at
does.
work ask me about it, and I was like, "What? I hadn't heard about this."
You know what I think it is. I think it's now that we have like these major systems in place, so for League of Legends, for Dota, for Overwatch, and you see these systems grow, and as games are being made, as they become popular once again, I think that just sets a place for people to be excited about something they like. So you like Dota.
What's
Dan,
Dota?
Dan likes League of Legends. I like Overwatch, and so on and so forth.
And Brittin's like Nintendo.
Nintendo esports.
Yeah. Put your hand
I
down.
mean,
So-
Splatoon.
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 So-
Honorable mention.
Kind of, yeah.
So when games are, I think, are being developed, and you see, okay, Overwatch did it like this, they did it like this, I think they have the ability to, say, okay, we want to make it competitive, let's do it, and then people can go on and just support that, and it becomes that much easier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're absolutely
And there's
right.
there's a couple other elements that I think play in every single one of these situations. Any game that we talk about here,
Yeah.
it's so easy to imagine yourself playing at that level, right? Like if I were to go and play pickup football, right? If I were to go try and find somewhere to play football, I'm probably going to go to a flag football league, and if I haven't played football before, I'm never going to be able to figure out a way to get into some sort of full contact football.
Yeah.
It's not an option. There's no, I can't imagine a way that I could randomly be playing in a game against Marshawn Lynch or something.
Yeah.
But in every single one of these games, that's absolutely possible. They all have these online matchmaking systems. They usually have ranked ladders. So if you get really good,
You're
you
gonna
can
play
be
against these
playing
guys.
There's,
Yep.
I remember in college watching a friend of mine play, and he was playing League of Legends, and I looked at the other team, and I saw, that's Medios.
Yeah.
That guy's on cloud
That's
9.
disgusting. You're joking with me.
I'm
right?
not joking.
That's crazy.
I'm absolutely not joking.
Well,
so and so that I think that helps.
yeah.
Additionally, there's a couple other things. First off, and we'll touch more on this next time.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, Twitch makes it very easy to watch this stuff whenever you want.
Very accessible,
And
too.
the broadcast format, if you want to watch a football game, you have to have your NFL pass or have the Verizon thing or whatever. Like you have to find a way to get into that. If you have access to the internet, you can watch any of these things that we've talked about for free, probably on YouTube
Yep.
or Twitch.
Well, anyway, I think that's a good ending point right there. We're going to be talking more about MOBAs and RTSs, so prepare for the 5-minute RTS talk and then the 55-minute League and Dota talk.
also prepare for the
Prepare for nap time for me. Sorry, guys.
Prepare for the 2.5 minutes of me saying, "All right, these are the things that I skipped over that I realized I shouldn't have last
Oh my
time."
gosh, yeah. And
But I'll make sure to keep it short.
me and Dan getting in a fist fight, which MOBA's better. Anyway, yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. So I think we'll call it there.
Yep.
All right.
Thank
Thank you guys for listening.
Yeah.
We have Scott.
Hi, I'm Scott.
We have Brittin.
Yep.
We have Zach.
Yep.
I'm Dan.
And,
And we're
that's-
signing off.
Yeah.
See y'all next week.
That's
Bye, guys.
VGRx, guys. See you next week. Part 2. Woo.
Wait. Shout out to the studio that we're recording
Oh,
in.
yeah, absolutely. Wow, that was super.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks to NWCZ Radio, as always. You guys are amazing for letting us use the studio.
NWCC.
NWCZ Radio. Go check them out on the .coms. Just type in nwczradio.com. It'll take you right there. You won't find us there, but you'll find them. But you can find us at Facebook and Twitter at VGRx.
Video Game Pharmacy.
Video Game Pharmacy. Find us there. Subscribe. Tweet at us and tell us how much idiots we are for not knowing what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.